Most people don't lose their lives in big dramatic moments. They lose it in silent emotional reactions they never paused to question. One feeling, one impulse, one unguarded reaction is often enough to change everything. What feels right in the moment can quietly become the reason for lifelong regret. So the real question is not how deeply you feel, but how well you can control what you feel before it controls you. Stop being an emotional fool. Yes, I mean exactly what I said. Because if nobody has ever been honest with you about this, then let this be the moment you hear it clearly. Your emotions are not your enemy, but they are also not your leader. They are meant to serve you, not control you. And the more you allow them to take charge of your life, the more you end up making choices you cannot undo, stepping into relationships that drain you, and creating memories you wish you could erase. You end up crying over people who never valued your tears. You exhaust yourself trying to fix situations that were never meant to be in your hands. And somehow, you label it as love, loyalty, or kindness. But in many cases, it's not love at all. It's emotional dependency disguised as care. You hand over your peace so easily, like it has no value, giving it to people who never earned even a piece of it. Then you wonder why you feel empty, tired, and unseen. The truth is simple. People will use your emotions if you allow them to. Life itself will take advantage of your softness if you don't build boundaries around your inner world. Being emotional is not a weakness, but being controlled entirely by emotions can destroy your direction in life. You cannot make permanent life decisions based on temporary emotional states. You cannot sacrifice your future just to feel temporarily needed in someone else's confusion. So ask yourself, how long are you going to keep apologizing for feeling too much, caring too deeply, or giving too easily? At some point, you have to realize it's not about changing your heart. It's about changing how you handle it. You don't need less emotion, you need more control. You don't need to stop feeling, you need to start understanding your feelings. You need boundaries, not emotional chaos. You need clarity, not impulsive reactions. You need awareness, not automatic responses. Because the moment you stop letting emotions drive every decision, that's the moment you start taking your power back. Emotions are what make us human, yes, but unchecked emotions can also make us prisoners of our own mind. Think about it honestly. How many times have you reacted in a moment and later thought, why did I do that? How many times have anger, sadness, or the need for validation pushed you into decisions you later regretted? That's not because you are broken. That's because you are human. But being human doesn't mean you surrender your entire life to emotional impulses. Emotions are powerful forces. They can push you toward greatness or pull you into destruction. One moment of confidence can help you stand up for yourself. One moment of fear can make you walk away from something meaningful. Emotions can build connections or destroy them in seconds. They can create compassion or fuel conflict. That is the level of power they hold. But power without control becomes dangerous. Think of fire. It can warm your home or burn it completely down. The fire itself is not good or bad. It depends on how it is handled. Your emotions are the same. They are tools, not absolute truths. They are signals, not instructions. And when you finally understand this difference, your entire mindset begins to shift. Now be honest with yourself. When you lose control in frustration, when you chase attention from the wrong people, or when you stay in situations that clearly hurt you just because you feel attached, who is really in control? Is it you or is it your emotions making decisions on your behalf? When emotions take the driver's seat, they don't care about your destination. They only care about the intensity of the moment. They will make you say things you never meant, tolerate things you shouldn't, and abandon your standards without even realizing it. All because the feeling in that moment was too loud to ignore. But the people who build strong lives don't operate like that. They don't deny emotions. They simply don't surrender to them. They feel fear, but still move forward. They feel rejection, but still respect themselves. They feel confusion, but continue walking with discipline. That is real strength. And here is something important to understand. You don't need to become emotionally numb to gain control. You don't need to shut your heart down or turn cold. You just need awareness. You need to recognize that every emotion you feel is trying to tell you something, but not everything it tells you is accurate or worth acting on immediately. Sadness can reveal where healing is needed. Anger can point to a boundary that was crossed. Love, when balanced, can transform your life in powerful ways. But none of these emotions should be allowed to blindly run your decisions. The real shift happens when you start pausing before reacting. When you begin asking yourself whether what you are feeling is actually truth or just a temporary emotional wave trying to take control. That one habit alone can save you from years of regret. Because you are not weak for feeling deeply. You become weak only when those feelings start making decisions for you without resistance. Emotional mastery is not about removal of feelings, it's about regulation of them. It's about feeling everything but being ruled by nothing. If you look closely at life, most irreversible mistakes don't come from logic. They come from emotional impulses. One message sent in anger, one decision made in loneliness, one yes given when your inner voice clearly said no. And once the moment passes, emotions move on quickly, but consequences stay behind and demand payment. That's the difference you need to understand. Feelings are temporary, but outcomes are long-term. Feelings fade, but consequences remain. And if you keep choosing emotion over awareness, you will keep creating problems your future self has to clean up. At the end of the day, your emotions are not the problem. Your lack of control over them is. When you learn to observe them instead of obey them instantly, you step into a completely different level of personal power. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop being pulled in every direction and start choosing your direction. That is where real growth begins. Not when you stop feeling, but when you finally learn how to lead yourself beyond your feelings. And that's exactly how things start falling apart. When emotions take over completely, you don't just make choices, you make consequences you have to live with. Think about it. You get upset with someone you care about, and in that heat of the moment, you say things that can't be taken back. You feel unworthy, and suddenly you start chasing people who don't even respect your value. You feel a burst of motivation, and you impulsively leave something stable without a real plan. It all feels justified in the moment because emotion is loud, but direction is missing. And the worst part, it always feels right until it doesn't. Once the feeling settles, what's left behind is not freedom, it's damage control. Regret, confusion, and sometimes broken relationships or lost opportunities you didn't fully think through. That's why real discipline isn't about action alone. It's about restraint. It's about having the strength to pause instead of reacting instantly. It's the ability to feel something strongly but still say, I'm not going to act on this right now. It's asking yourself a simple but powerful question. Will I still stand by this decision when my mind is calm again? That small pause, that moment of reflection, can completely change the direction of your life. It can protect you from decisions that take years to recover from. This doesn't mean ignoring your emotions or pretending they don't exist. It means respecting them without letting them take control. Let them speak to you, but don't let them make final decisions for you. Use your emotions as information, not instructions. Because emotions can be intense, but they are temporary. Your future, however, is not temporary, and it should never be shaped by a feeling that might not even last the day. Your emotions are signals, not punishments. They are there to alert you, not to control your entire life. Let them inform you, but don't let them imprison you. You owe yourself the patience to pause before committing your life decisions to temporary states of mind. Some of the biggest regrets people carry didn't come from lack of feeling, they came from reacting too fast. Saying yes too quickly, saying no too emotionally, acting before thinking, and later realizing the cost was heavier than the moment ever suggested. So feel everything, but choose carefully. Now ask yourself honestly, how much of your peace have you already sacrificed just to keep the wrong people comfortable around you? How many times have you ignored your inner voice just to avoid conflict? How often have you tolerated disrespect just to maintain silence and avoid tension? Over time, this becomes exhausting. Your mind gets tired, your heart feels heavy, and your peace slowly disappears without you even noticing it happening. Here's something most people learn too late. Peace is not something you find, it's something you actively protect. And protecting it requires boundaries, not walls that shut everyone out, not bitterness that hardens your heart, but clear emotional boundaries that define what you accept and what you refuse to allow again. Because people rarely respect what you don't enforce. If you allow repeated disrespect without consequences, you teach others how to treat you. If you keep saying it's fine when it isn't, you slowly train people to ignore your limits. That isn't kindness. That is emotional overexposure. And over time, it costs you your self-respect. You can't keep investing your energy into endless draining conversations, one-sided relationships, or situations where you constantly feel emotionally depleted. Every time you agree to something your inner voice rejects, you slowly betray your own self-trust. And when that pattern continues, self-betrayal starts to feel normal. You begin feeling guilty for resting, guilty for saying no, guilty for choosing distance. And that's where identity starts to fade. Not because you are weak, but because you stopped protecting your limits. Kindness without boundaries is not strength. It eventually becomes self-neglect in disguise. You are not meant to be available to everyone at all times for everything. You are not responsible for managing everyone's emotions. And you are definitely not required to stay in situations that continuously drain your energy. You have every right to say, I need space. You have every right to say, this is affecting my peace. You have every right to step away from what consistently disturbs your mental balance. Setting boundaries does not make you cold or selfish. It makes you aware of your own value. It shows that you've reached a level of maturity where guilt no longer controls your decisions. At first, this shift feels uncomfortable. When you start saying no after always saying yes, people will react. Some will question you. Some will say you've changed. Some may even distance themselves. And that's completely fine, because those who only benefited from your lack of boundaries were never truly invested in your well-being. They were invested in your availability. Peace always comes with a price. It may cost approval, comfort, and sometimes even relationships. But what you gain in return is clarity, stability, and self-respect. And over time, you realize it was worth everything. You stop apologizing for protecting your energy. You stop explaining why you refuse chaos disguised as connection. You start seeing people for who they truly are, those who value you and those who only value access to you. And slowly, you become someone who cannot be emotionally manipulated, guilt-tripped, or drained into exhaustion anymore. Boundaries are not barriers built out of fear. They are filters built out of wisdom. They don't block life, they protect it. True strength is not always loud. Sometimes it's staying quiet when you want to explode. Sometimes it's walking away when your pride wants to stay and argue. Sometimes it's choosing peace over being right. And sometimes it's simply being calm in situations that once used to break you. That is emotional intelligence. Not suppressing what you feel, but understanding it deeply enough to choose your response instead of reacting blindly. There is a misunderstanding that emotional control means shutting down your feelings. That is not true. Real emotional intelligence is feeling everything fully, but refusing to be controlled by it. It is knowing when to speak and when silence is wiser, when to stay and when to leave, when to engage and when to step back. Because the people who react the most are often the ones who feel the most out of control inside. They don't just experience emotions, they become them. And when people haven't learned how to process their emotions properly, they start expecting the entire world to adjust around them. Everyone else has to be careful. Careful with words, careful with tone, careful with timing, just to avoid triggering a reaction. But emotional maturity changes that completely. You stop relying on others to stabilize your inner world. You become your own grounding force. And that shift is powerful in ways most people don't even realize at first. Imagine a life where other people's behavior no longer controls your mood, where chaos can exist around you, but it doesn't enter you, where criticism can be heard without shaping your identity. That is what emotional intelligence really gives you. It doesn't make you distant or cold, it makes you clear about what deserves your attention, what deserves your energy, and what doesn't deserve access to your peace. You also start learning how to handle conflict without losing yourself in it. You become more intentional about protecting your inner stability without becoming passive or emotionally closed off. And one thing most people never understand is this: every person who is emotionally balanced today was once overwhelmed by their emotions. Every calm personality you admire was once reactive, impulsive, and easily triggered. The difference is, they stopped allowing every feeling to turn into action. They learned the value of pausing. They began asking themselves better questions instead of just reacting. Why am I feeling this so strongly right now? What is really underneath this emotion? Am I reacting to what is happening now, or something from my past that hasn't healed yet? These questions are not comfortable, but they are transformative, because self-awareness forces growth, even when it feels uncomfortable. And when you grow internally, everything around you starts to shift too. Size. You will notice that your calmness starts affecting others. Not everyone will respond positively to your peace. Some people become uncomfortable when you stop reacting the way you used to. Some were only ever connected to the old version of you, the one who over-explained, argued, chased validation, or reacted instantly. But now you respond differently, not because you care less, but because you finally care with wisdom instead of impulse. So allow yourself to feel everything. Don't suppress your emotions or pretend they don't exist. Let them rise, but don't let them take control. Speak to your anger and remind it that it does not make your decisions. Acknowledge your fear, but don't let it design your future. Sit with your sadness, but don't let it define your direction. That is not emotional denial. That is emotional discipline. That is real intelligence. That is strength no one can take away from you. Taking control of your emotions is not just a small improvement in behavior. It is a complete shift in power. It is the moment you stop being pushed around by moods, reactions, and external circumstances, and you start directing your own life. For many people, this becomes the first real experience of freedom. Because if you look honestly at your past, how much of it was shaped by emotional reactions? How many days were lost overthinking conversations, replaying moments, or trying to fix things that only left you drained? How many decisions were made from fear, insecurity, or guilt instead of clarity? When emotions are in full control, you are not truly moving forward. You are only reacting. You are active, but not intentional. You are living, but not fully present. Emotions are powerful, but without direction, they will take you places you never meant to go. This is why emotional control is not about shutting feelings down. It is about mastering the part of you that reacts instantly to discomfort. The part that confuses attention with love, silence with rejection, and temporary discomfort with permanent loss. When you begin to lead your emotions instead of following them blindly, you stop being a passenger in your own life. You take the wheel. And that change is subtle, but life-altering. However, this level of awareness is not easy to develop. It demands honesty. It forces you to confront patterns you may have ignored for years. Why do I keep repeating the same emotional cycles? Why do I allow certain people access to me even when they don't value it? Why do I feel uneasy when things are finally calm? These are not simple questions, but they are necessary ones, because nothing changes until you become honest with yourself. You cannot heal what you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot grow while repeating the same emotional patterns. And once you begin to take responsibility for your emotional responses, your entire life starts to improve. You stop letting anger destroy relationships you might regret later. You stop letting anxiety rush you into decisions you are not ready for. You stop letting sadness convince you that nothing will ever change. Slowly, your thinking becomes clearer. You begin to protect your time more carefully. You become more selective with your energy. You start walking away from anything that consistently disturbs your growth or peace. Not everyone will understand this transformation. Some will label it as distance or change, but they never saw the internal battles you fought, the sleepless nights, the emotional exhaustion, the moments where everything felt too heavy to handle. They didn't see the effort it took to rebuild yourself from within, and they don't need to, because the version of you that emerges from that process doesn't need approval. It simply lives differently, more stable, more aware, more intentional. When you gain control over your emotions, you stop giving the loudest feeling in your mind automatic authority over your life. You can feel fear and still move forward. You can feel triggered and still choose restraint. You can feel disappointment and still remain steady. That is not suppression, that is mastery. And once you reach that point, you begin to look back at your past self with understanding, but also gratitude, because every version of you that struggled emotionally was still learning how to survive. But now you are no longer just surviving, you are consciously leading yourself. The cycle changes completely. No more impulsive reactions. No more giving your peace away easily. No more allowing emotional chaos to dictate your direction. From this point forward, you are done being controlled by internal instability. You are done reacting without awareness. You are done explaining your growth to people who are committed to misunderstanding it. This is your moment to rise, not loudly, but clearly, not through emotional reactions, but through intentional living. You don't need perfection. You only need control over yourself. Because when you master your internal world, nothing external can easily break you. So pause before you speak. Reflect before you react. Protect your peace like it determines your future, because in many ways, it does. You are not overly emotional. You are powerful when your emotions work for you instead of against you. Use that power wisely. Live with intention. Inspiring. Lead yourself with purpose and build a version of you that remains steady no matter what life throws your way. If you really look at life, Most of the pain people carry doesn't come from what happened to them, but from how they reacted in emotional moments. One heated conversation, one impulsive message, one decision made in anger or fear can completely change the direction of a life. In the moment, it always feels justified. Emotions make everything feel urgent, real, and important. But once the feeling fades, what remains is often regret, confusion, or damage that takes a long time to repair. The truth is, emotions are not the problem. The problem starts when emotions are in full control and logic is pushed aside. When you feel angry, you want to speak immediately. When you feel hurt, you want to react instantly. When you feel lonely, you may settle for things you normally wouldn't accept. And when you feel inspired, you might rush into decisions without thinking about long-term consequences. In every case, the feeling is temporary, but the outcome can last for years. Real strength is not about stopping emotions. It is about learning how to pause before they take over your actions. That small space between feeling and reacting is where your power exists. In that moment, you can choose whether to respond wisely or act impulsively. Most people don't realize how much damage they could avoid just by waiting a little before reacting. Emotional control doesn't mean you become cold or robotic. It means you start understanding your feelings instead of obeying them blindly. You still feel deeply, but you don't let those feelings make every decision for you. You begin to recognize patterns in yourself. You notice when fear is speaking, when insecurity is influencing you, and when past pain is shaping your reactions in the present. As you grow in emotional awareness, something interesting happens. You stop being easily disturbed by everything around you. Other people's behavior no longer controls your mood as much. Criticism doesn't shake your identity the way it used to. Silence from others doesn't automatically mean rejection anymore. You become more stable inside yourself instead of depending on external situations to feel okay. This stability also changes your relationships. You stop overreacting, over-explaining, or chasing validation. You communicate more clearly and set boundaries without guilt. You understand that protecting your peace is not selfish, it is necessary. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your time, energy, or emotions. The more you practice this, the more your life starts to shift. You make fewer emotional mistakes. You regret fewer decisions. You stop burning bridges that you later wish were still there. Instead of being controlled by moods, you start leading your life with clarity. You still feel everything, but you no longer let everything control you. And that is where real emotional maturity begins. The real victory is not in feeling less, but in mastering how you respond to what you feel. Life will always test you with emotions that feel urgent, intense, and undeniable, but not every feeling deserves action. When you learn to pause, reflect, and choose instead of react, you reclaim your power from chaos. And that is where true freedom begins. Not in controlling the world around you, but in finally controlling yourself.